Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another Chamber Check-in episode from Idaho's only five-star accredited chamber. Today, I'm thrilled to be able to talk about something very unique from the founder of Spacepoint. It's a nonprofit organization that engages explorers of all ages to learn more about how industry and space collide. Are you ready? I'm going to bring Kyle on the stage right now. Hi, Kyle.
Hey, Paul, how you doing?
I'm terrific. It was
Good,
kind of
good.
fun as we were going to broadcast. I was counting down 10,
Yeah.
9, 8, and we'll talk more about that, what that means and why that's relevant. But Kyle, thanks so much for coming today and sharing a little bit about your nonprofit. And I just came off a tour of the Idaho National Laboratory,
Oh, great.
and we had an opportunity to talk about uh, energy, right?
Hmm.
And how things get fueled and the future of energy. And we dabbled a little bit of space. And so I'm really excited to learn what your organization does. But first, to start with you, Kyle, tell me and share a little bit about your background that led you into space exploration.
Well, that's an interesting question. My background is actually spent some time in the service, but most of my career was in the IT industry. And my wife and I actually, where this all started, and obviously the IT industry is the business velocity in the IT industry is very fast and it increases and it's constantly increasing. Now we're talking AI and quantum computing and what have you. It's always something new. Um, but my wife and I went to the Artemis launch, and Artemis is the counterpart to the Apollo program, and this was a couple of years ago. And what we realized after talking just to the average person out there was very few people really knew what was going on. So we started digging into, the metrics of the industry, and what we found was 12,000 companies now are participating, private companies in the private industry are participating in the space industry. That they represent a combined market cap of 4 trillion. That's forecast to grow to 10 by the end of this decade. And they also represent 80% of the total spend globally in the space industry. So a massive change from Apollo in years and the space shuttle years and what have you, to where now really the industry is dominated by the private sector. And when you look at those numbers and based upon my background, to take this full circle in the IT industry, obviously if you're in that career field, you're going to have a very long career, like many others, the medical industry, if you will, as another example. And so it just became apparent to us that the new IT industry is really the space industry. And if you think about that, who's in the space industry now? Well, Elon Musk. Well, where did Elon come from? Well, he started in the IT industry. Same with Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos started selling books out of his garage. So it's not just what they've brought to that industry is the mentality, right? The mentality of business velocity. We were talking about that before we came on. But the pace of change, and not simply accepting change or embracing change, which is, the old moniker, but really driving change. And so that's where you see now a transition to reusable and recycling of capital, if you will, versus simply throwing it away. Years ago when Apollo launched a space shuttle, of course, the shuttle was this first idea around, well, how can we reuse some of these assets? And now, there isn't a company out there now that isn't focused on or trying to focus on some aspect of reusability, because obviously it reduces the cost and it increases their business velocity. And so the pace of change and the change that you're driving increases over that time.
So Kyle, you started in information technology.
Yeah.
You saw collaboration between space and industry. And so now Spacepoint is a nonprofit organization. Tell me a little bit more about the mission and vision of Spacepoint, when it started, and maybe help me understand why.
Well, so going back to our, where we opened, this this discovery, if you will, of where the market was. We just felt, my wife and I, when we made this decision to start, was we couldn't let this opportunity pass people by. When you think of the future, probably and during my career, maybe 10, 20 different companies, 30 different roles within those companies, if you will. I think it's going to be even more going forward for the younger generation or the future generations, right? They're going to have to be extremely flexible and agile when it comes to their career. They're going to have to move, or they're going to be fall to stagnation and, frankly, fall behind. Especially when you get into quantum computing and artificial intelligence and how those are going to be leveraged for the space industry as well. So our hope is that we can drive in partnership. So we're in the process of creating this, or we have been since we launched, creating this network of subject matter experts across the industry, from higher education to the private sector. And then our goal, very simply, is to connect those experts with the general public. And then hopefully by doing so, we plant enough seeds to where maybe it wasn't on someone's radar initially as they started thinking about career and what have you. And it doesn't matter whether they're, just to take a step back for a second, but it doesn't matter whether they're in high school, college, early career, mid-career. I'm certainly not early or mid-career, and I'm participating today. We're actually just outside Kennedy Space Center today, waiting for the Europa Clipper launch. So the opportunity is there. And so what we tell people, though, that what's nice about it is because you have 12,000 companies, the span of, or the, if you will, the environment of opportunity within the space industry is tremendous. You don't have to be a test pilot anymore like you used to. That was a key criteria when the Apollo program first started. Obviously, they chose 7 test pilots, right? Now you can do anything you want. If you want to be an artist, be an artist. And simply what our message is whatever you love to do, continue to do that. Just point yourself to the space industry, because the amount of jobs and opportunity in that industry are so broad and the need is so great that you'll have a very, very long career. And what we hope to do is, just to put a close on that, is hopefully help people become dependable versus dependent, or independent, and thereby becoming dependable.
Where is your nonprofit headquartered? Are you here in Idaho? Because you just said you're at the Kennedy Space Center today.
Yeah, we are here in Idaho. And we started in Idaho, and we want to stay in Idaho. And so how this started, after this idea is like, geez, what can we do to help get the word out? I just picked up the phone and I called the University of Idaho, and I happened to call Dr. Jason Barnes. Well, Dr. Barnes happens to be what NASA would call the deputy principal investigator. So think of him as the vice president for the Dragonfly mission. Dragonfly will launch in 2028. And it's going to Titan, a moon of Saturn. And so you mentioned Idaho National Lab earlier. And so what dawned on us as well is, as you start looking just in Idaho, the number of experts and the number of people that are actually already participating in the space industry, it's pretty broad, right? So we started there, and we've been building that network with a whole bunch of folks from Idaho, including Idaho National Lab. We're going to run an event with the labs, Idaho National Lab and Pacific Northwest National Lab. We're going to bring the two together. So we've already talked to both of them. But, there's so many, and it's been, I kind of call it the easiest sale I've ever made, because these people want to tell their story. Yeah. And it's amazing how many people want to hear that story as well. And by doing so, as I said earlier, hopefully that plants some seeds, and people think, especially obviously, college, early career, mid-career, think, geez, maybe this is an area I could look and I can participate in.
Well, you really, when you start thinking about space and you start thinking about the technology that goes into launching satellites or taking people to the moon or taking satellites to Mars, you kind of forget about how does the Van Camp's pork and beans can get to the shelf it into your house. It's a different mentality,
Yeah.
Kyle. Which is really good to try and wrap your head around our little Earth in this atmosphere or in this universe, right? And
Very much so.
all the different opportunities. Um,
Well, people say, it's kind of funny you mentioned that, because people ask me, and well, why space, and why should we go to space? And I said, well, you don't have to go to space. You're already in space.
right.
You're in space 24 hours a day. You were born in space.
Right.
You're always going to be in space. And so, look out the window once in a while, right? And that's where we are today.
Okay, Kyle, tell me this is really exciting, because Heather Chandler on your team has been just a great friend of mine, and just a steward and an ambassador for Spacepoint as well. Every time we talk, there's always something that she's so excited about. But today you're at the Kennedy Space Center. Tell us about what's going on there, and how can we plug into what you're doing?
Yeah, so another subject matter expert right in Idaho, Dr. Matthew Hedman, is on the Europa Clipper team. Europa Clipper is the largest spacecraft ever built by NASA and Joint Propulsion Labs, NASA JPL, actually. And it's going to Europa. And the reason they're sending it to Europa is they believe that Europa, which is one of the Galilean moons, one of 4 Galileo moons, or moons discovered by Galileo, they believe it has a subsurface ocean, and they believe that ocean, or the total volume of ocean on that moon, is twice that of Earth. And then, of course, if it does have ocean, that's a key ingredient to one of the key ingredients to life. And so this is the type of science that you're starting to see, along with more and more humans exploration as well. So we just had the first private sector human spacewalk a couple of weeks ago. So it's, NASA's really starting to transition more into requirements, which I think is excellent from an agency like that, and really allowing the private sector, how it ties into chambers of commerce around the country, but allowing the private sector to figure out how. So we kind of think of it as NASA defines more the why and the what, and let the private sector figure out how to go and do it for them.
Okay. Well, good luck on the launch. When is that?
The launch is, we believe it'll be tomorrow. So just one other thing about that launch, it's the largest the most powerful operational rocket, and that's going to be followed by the 5th flight test of the largest rocket ever in history. Both of them are built by SpaceX. They're launching the former is launching a NASA payload. The latter is the actual test, and that occurs down in Texas, Boca Chica, Texas.
Okay, how's Mother Nature holding up for you down there? We've been following the natural disaster. Yeah, tell what's going on.
Well, this area right around Kennedy Space Center, this area actually we did okay. Not a lot of damage, and they were actually able to recover pretty quickly. We had at one point, I tell you, they marshal, that hurricanes are one of those things that they do a pretty good job here in Florida. It's not the first time, probably like in Idaho, not the first time we've seen a snowstorm or a forest fire, right? You kind of know how to do those things, and they know how to handle hurricanes. And they had 10, 20 just in the parking lot out here, 10, 20 utility trucks, command center, everything. They were totally ready. So, of course, we're on the eastern side of the state. So the western side of the state, they're still, it's going to be a few weeks for them. But the eastern seaboard fared pretty well, actually, considering.
Okay. Kyle, you're partnering with an organization to host an event here at Jump on October 25th. And let's help build the stoke for the Stoke Space, brought to you by Spacepoint. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, we're super excited to obviously be working with you. And I have to mention one thing about Heather, it's a little inside baseball, but we call Heather the most interesting woman in the world. So, and you probably know why. So But Heather's awesome. We love Heather. And, getting to Boise, we are partnered with NASA ISGC. So NASA ISGC, which is run out of University of Idaho, they handle the entire budget for NASA in the state of Idaho. So we have a great partnership with them. And one of the things they asked us to do when we started, really it was 30 days after we started, we had a meeting and they said, hey, how quickly can you expand across Idaho? So that's our first event in Boise. We've had in Sandpoint, Coeur d'Alene, and now expanding down to Boise. This will be our first of 3 events at Jump. The first was Stoke Space. Stoke Space is a startup. The members are from Blue Origin. That's where they hail from originally. They are in Everett, or Kent, excuse me, and their test site is right over the border, right over the Idaho border in Moses Lake. So we have this will be the 3rd or 4th time that we've met with them. We're going to meet with them tomorrow here out at Kennedy. But a very, very, very interesting company. I'll give you an analogy from a business perspective. So Rocket Lab is a startup as well. They're a little ahead of Stoke. They've launched 50 times now for the private sector and for NASA or public sector. They're currently worth $5 billion in market cap after 50 launches, just 50 launches. Stoke is going to be in the same category. There's no doubt in my mind. They're focused almost exclusively on reusability. So when you think about business velocity, where we started this conversation, if you think, so their turnaround time, what they're looking at is 24 hours. So they launch, they come back, they launch again. If they can get to that, and anyone that's on the call here that has been in business for more than a couple of days understands that when you can turn around, and essentially turn it into a commodity, you're going to see big time growth. So we're very, very excited. We love our relationships with higher education. And this is just an example of the relationships we're building in the private sector as well.
What will guests experience at this October 25th event at Jump? I think it's 5 to 8.
Yeah, so 5 o'clock it starts. There'll be a happy hour, if you will, exclusive to those folks who attend the happy hour. Then at 6 o'clock, and of course, Stoke will be there. And then after that happy hour, we'll go to, it's catered as well by the folks at Jump. I should mention that. After that, we'll have the talk, if you will, the Stoke talk for about an hour. And, Q&A on these things, it's always crazy, Paul, because, you don't want to waste people's time. But then once the Q&A starts, it just, unless we cut it off, it'll just keep on going. And that's been something that's been a great indicator of the demand and the interest in this. So we'll see how long it lasts, how long the Q&A goes. But of course, they'll be there. And if you attend, if you start at 5 o'clock, then of course you'll have all kinds of, time with the folks at Stoke. So what they're going to talk about though is the world's first. There's a few world first designs that they're in the process of testing and have successfully tested. So one of them is their method for cooling the rocket so that they can get to that 24-hour turnaround, right? With a space shuttle, most people, may not realize this, but when the space shuttle came back, they were, they typically had to run fluid to cool it through the skin. So even though, because the heat tiles would absorb a lot of heat. So it usually took, several weeks for them to get back to the point to where they could theoretically relaunch. Well, to go to 24-hour turnaround, it's like an aircraft. That's one of the analogies they use. You fly from, Idaho to Florida. They offload the plane, they load other passengers on, and they take off again and fly back to Idaho. So that's what they're shooting for. So if they can get to that point, the sky's the limit for them, literally.
Literally. I love it. Reusable rockets. Smart. Your website is scrolling at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah.
Spacepoint.org for more information. I'm actually on it right now. I'm looking over at I can register and get tickets. I think it's $25 for a ticket.
Yep.
Is
Yeah,
there? Go ahead.
One other thing about the organization too that I think is a little bit different. There was a big decision about LLC versus 501c. We chose the nonprofit route just because we wanted to minimize the barrier, and we're not interested in competing with anybody. We're trying to bring, these two groups of these, subject matter experts and the general public together. No one on our board makes a penny off any of this. We're all doing this because we love it. And so any money that goes towards this, the $25 goes towards covering the cost of the hors d'oeuvres and drinks and what have you. So,
hey,
100. We like to say 100% of the money, all the money goes towards the programs and what have you that we're bringing to the public.
Hey, for the last couple of minutes here that I have you, why don't you shout out your board and kind of the quality of people that's on your team that are the like-minded team, right? And then, is there anything else that you'd like to educate the public on while we have you, Kyle?
I think the thing that's kind of been interesting for us is just talking to people about this. It's amazing the number of people you come across, and I love the culture of the folks that are involved in all of this, because you think about a team, to use that type of analogy, and it doesn't matter what kind of team, any kind of team, but everyone's focused on the same objective. And so, it's really interesting. People from all walks of life, and the degree of interest that some folks have that you think, well, maybe I won't mention it to them. And then you mention it to them and you find out, oh yeah, well, my so-and-so is, running this program or that program or what have you. So I would just say, if you're interested at all, come out and check it out. You never know who you're going to run into. It's kind of a big networking exercise, and, it's kind of interesting the folks you come across. So.
And then, is there anybody else on your team you want to shout out today while we have you?
Well, I'd like to start with Heather, because Heather's located there in Boise. And as I said, we joke a lot, but she really is a very, very interesting person. Every time I talk to Heather, I learn something new, which is always, interesting given the number of years that we've known her. But certainly, Peter Sarant, for example, is on our board. Peter's from an executive at NVIDIA. So if you follow artificial intelligence at all, Peter basically runs all their operations. So he's joined the board. We have a very, very diverse board from an experience perspective, different, career fields and what have you. Another one, Zach Etienne, his focus has been he's a mathematician, and he's focused 100% on physics, and specifically black holes. So in May of next year, we're going to bring Dr. Landry from Caltech. I guess I should have mentioned that. So Stoke in a couple of weeks here, and then we have MIT in February, and then Caltech in May. You can find information about all those. I won't go into nitty-gritty detail, but I think if you kind of, we don't put a lot of information on the site about our board, Paul, because it's not about us. Right. It's not about the people. It's about the experts, and it's about the general public, and that's really where we prefer the focus to stay. But we like to think we've assembled a pretty diverse set of skills on the board, and again, you'll get a chance to meet them as well as we move forward. So
awesome. Well, I would encourage anybody who's listening to go to spacepoint.org. I'm checking it out right now. You've got Uranus at opposition Saturday, November 16th up in Sandpoint. And then there's the MIT event in February at JUMP, the planetary science event.
Yeah, that's Dr. Ben Weiss, who heads planetary science at MIT. So we'll be bringing him out to Idaho. And I think that's one thing, I guess, perhaps to reiterate a little bit is, bring as many people as you can, because the more people we bring, then it's really easy to get someone from MIT to come out. Right? Because now there's an audience, right? If no one shows up, then it's like, well, why should I go? right? And why do we all have the same number of hours in a day, and people have to figure out how they're going to spend their time in that day. And but we think this is extremely valuable for a variety of reasons, as I mentioned earlier. So, if you're not doing anything Friday night, it's only a couple hours,
Well, Kyle, I got to thank you for bringing space into the Boise Metro Chamber. We are very excited to partner with you, and we're here for the long road. So I look forward to our next conversation, Kyle. I'm sure I'll see you on the 25th. Tell Heather thanks from us, and
I will.
Appreciate your investment into the chamber.
Oh, no problem at all. I have to give Heather the credit. She's done a tremendous amount of legwork on this. And, you mentioned what's the future? Well, we want to grow to a national organization. We have folks in New York on both coasts. And so hopefully we can continue to grow and continue to bring this content. There's plenty of people that want to tell their story. And, it's the same in your private sector is looking for talent from a workforce perspective, and higher education is looking for talent from a student perspective. So we're trying to build that pipeline to help both of those, whether it's higher education or the private sector, with talent, and drive that talent to those businesses that need them, obviously.
Awesome. Well, we don't often think about how industry and space are related on a day-to-day basis. So I'm so glad you're there. Looking forward to our next conversation, Kyle.
Cool. Sounds good. See you, Paul. Thanks, everybody.
Good luck in your launch.
Thanks.